Our updated 2024 rankings are out, and 12 players earned the 5-star tag, but the number one player is still number one. Why this quarterback sits atop the future class, and why this one has the best current stats. Drake May almost didn't suit up for the Tar Heels. The story of his wild ride to Chapel Hill, and much more. The College Football Recruiting Show starts right now. Welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show. I'm Emily Proud alongside Blair Angulo. Happy Thursday. We hope you feel as refreshed as our 2024 rankings. As always, please send some questions, comments, concerns, whatever you got in the chat here, and we will answer them at the end of the show. But this is the beginning of the show, which means we've got some headlines. After much deliberation, the number one player in the 2024 class is still quarterback Dylan Raiola. The Ohio State commit is just that good. How good is he, Blair?
Yeah, Dylan Raiola is very, very good. So good, Emily, that if he was a part of this 2023 recruiting class, he would still be among the top players in the country, right there with Arch Manning, right there with Dante Moore and Nico Iamaleava and all the other quarterbacks that are at the top of the rankings. A big physical presence. He's a good athlete. The ball looks really small in his hands, and he can really control the line of scrimmage. I think he's a phenomenal prospect, and obviously Ohio State also thinks so as well, taking his commitment really early on in the recruiting cycle.
Ooh, some high praise there. All right, a Buckeye back out for 4-star running back Mark Fletcher. He decommitted from Ohio State yesterday, and Blake Alderman of Swamp 24/7 put in a crystal ball for him to Florida. His American Heritage teammate and 3-star wideout Brandon Inez helped quell worries that he might follow Fletcher. He tweeted this saying, "Nothing to worry about," and he will be at the shoe for the Michigan game next weekend. But Blair, what happened with Fletcher?
Yeah, this is obviously a classic case of, a recruit going and taking other visits and maybe committing a bit too early. He was all in on Ohio State, but you look at the persistence and the continued recruitment of programs like Florida and Miami and others that have continued to press. The closer it gets to the early signing period, I think some of these recruits start to realize, okay, maybe I need to back off and make a really good decision here because this is going to be the next few years of my life.
All right, 4-star linebacker Arian Carter decommitted from Memphis yesterday. He had been locked in since July. Carter is set to take visits to Tennessee and Alabama in December. Ohio State, the most recent place he visited. Whoever gets him gets what?
An ultra athletic linebacker. He's also a basketball player and does some track and field, so he has multi-sport background. And when you think about college football in the modern landscape, the linebacker position is one of those very versatile hybrid roles. You have to be able to run. You have to be able to be big and physical enough to shed blocks in the box. So Arian Carter obviously checks both of those boxes, and he has the potential to do both.
4-star quarterback DJ Lagway was labeled the 6th best quarterback in the 2024 class. Where's he headed? Well, he intends to tell us on December 7th, but he's currently deciding between USC, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Florida, and Baylor. Lots of options there, but where are you leaning, Blair?
He's a Baylor legacy, but I think Florida and USC are in the best position. He's been a constant visitor over in Gainesville, and you think about what Billy Napier just did in the 2023 recruiting cycle, flipping Jaden Rashada. How about following that up with getting DJ Lagway, the 5-star quarterback from the state of Texas? Keep an eye on USC. You never count out Lincoln Riley for quarterbacks, and it looks like he will be in Los Angeles next weekend for that USC Notre Dame game. So I think USC, Florida right now battling out for DJ Lagway.
All right, that's just a taste. So much to discuss from the updated 2024 rankings. 12 players earning that 5-star status. So who better to talk to than our very own 5-star Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, we mentioned the number one player in the class, but the number two player is safety KJ Bolden. This season, he has visited Ohio State, Tennessee, Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and South Carolina. Been all over the place. What's the latest with him?
Well, I talked to KJ this week, and he said he's been really impressed with Kirby Smart and what he's continuing to do at Georgia. He's loving what he's seeing at Ohio State. He's going to be back up in Columbus for the Michigan game. He started the season at Ohio State, attending their win at Notre Dame. So bookending those college visits. He's been to some of the best games in the country this year. LSU, Brian Kelly, Cortez Hankton, talked about the great job they're doing, and he can't wait to get back to Baton Rouge. And KJ Bolden, he's the #1 safety in the country. But some of these schools love him at wideout. He could definitely play on that side of the ball on Saturdays as well.
Steve, let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. Sammy Brown is going to be one of the more coveted linebackers in the 2024 class out of the state of Georgia, #6 overall in the 24 top 24/7 refresh. What's the latest on Sammy Brown?
Well, he's got his eye on several schools as well. It's early for a lot of these young men in their processes, but Clemson and Georgia are the two that I believe are in the strongest position to land the top-ranked linebacker in the country. He's been attending camps at Clemson for a very long time. They were the first prospect that they offered a scholarship to in the 2024 cycle. Normally they wait till June 1 to offer scholarships to players, but they hit Sammy early on that because they know him so well. They've had him to campus so many times. He's been to 2 games this fall, so no question he loves Clemson, loves new defensive coordinator Coach Goodwin, and of course Dabo Swinney, but he's also extremely high on Georgia, in my opinion. I don't know if he has a better relationship with a college coach than Bulldogs defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann. And I think that with what he's seen on the field with Georgia and the way they've recruited, I think that also looks very enticing to Sammy as well. There are some other contenders. You got Tennessee, you got Ohio State and Notre Dame. He wanted to be at Oklahoma this weekend for Bedlam, but not able to make it out there. But we talked about those relationships he has with Clemson. You know, some of those obviously carried over to Oklahoma when Brent Venables moved to the corner office in Norman.
Another 5-star, Williams and Nwaneri, has been busy this season, stacking up visits to Arkansas, Kansas, Mizzou, Oklahoma. So where does his recruitment stand right now?
Well, Oklahoma, Oregon, Missouri, Michigan State, Tennessee, Alabama, those were the programs that he said he's communicating with the most. And I think it's super early in his process. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I could really peg a leader in that one. But obviously he's going to be one of the more coveted players in the country. So I look for that one to really get exciting with his process heating up.
Steve, you've mentioned Oklahoma quite a bit. You could see that Brent Venables is making an impact in the 2024 class. Specifically, David Stone is another player that I think right now the Sooners lead in the crystal ball. What makes Oklahoma a strong contender right now for David Stone?
Well, he's an Oklahoma native that will be back for the Bedlam game this weekend, a massive recruiting weekend at Oklahoma that's also going to include 5-star David DJ Hicks, Notre Dame safety commit Peyton Bowen, who they've been trying to flip for a long time. But David Stone, he's certainly a prospect that they'll be super excited to see alongside those elite players in 2023. He was most recently in East Lansing for a Michigan State game. I know he loves Mel Tucker and that staff and what they're trying to build in East Lansing. So those are 2 programs I know are doing well early. He also mentioned Miami and Texas A&M as schools that he's really interested in early. He's got an upcoming visit to Georgia planned. He's going to go to Tennessee in January. So a lot of early contenders for David Stone.
All right, I think you can sense a trend here. The 5-star discussion continues with wide receiver Jeremiah Smith out of Florida. Ohio State, crystal ball favorite right now. You put one in from him, Steve. Why is that?
I think that they set the tone early with him getting in the campus several times, and I think the relationship with Brian Hartline, Coach Hartline's track record of developing wide receivers, and Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson's offense collectively have put Ohio State in the driver's seat for Jeremiah Smith. Look, if you're the starting wideout at Ohio State, and I mean that in a plural way, you have a good chance of hearing your name in the first round, and I think that's very enticing to Smith. He's still talking to other programs. Miami's a program that's really pushing hard, and he was back there a couple weekends ago. But Ohio State has set the tone there, and I think it's up to the rest of America to prove to Jeremiah that they got something better to offer than Ohio State, and that's going to be hard to do with what they're doing offensively. And again, Brian Hartline and the knack he has for not only developing his players, but building great relationships with them. You guys saw that touchdown by Cameron Babb there, all the ACL tears. Ohio State sticking with him, former All-American that's been through so much, gets in the end zone there for Ohio State last weekend. That was a very genuine emotional deal for the Ohio State locker room there. And I think those are all reasons why it adds up for Jeremiah Smith and his love for Ohio State.
Steve, staying on that five-star trend, Clemson, Georgia, and Notre Dame are all in the mix right now as front runners for Mike Matthews, the number one athlete in the 24 class. When do you expect him to come off the board?
I don't think he's in any hurry. He's seen Georgia play 3 times this year, though, and I know he's extremely excited about the Bulldogs. Clemson is another offer that he was super excited to get. Had a really good visit to Alabama as well, blown away by talking to Nick Saban. Notre Dame was the first program to really identify Mike Matthews a lot earlier than every other powerhouse program as a big-time dude and prioritize them. So I would say his relationship with these contenders regarding Notre Dame is the longest. He got a chance to visit there last year, and I think that really resonated with him. And USC took a summer visit out to see the Trojans and had a really good time too. Mike Matthews, his parents both were Division I college basketball players, and his dad's in the Hall of Fame over at where he played his college basketball. I want to say it was Stony Brook where he played, Siena, excuse me. So he comes from great bloodlines, parents that have been through it, and he's also a really good basketball player that has an offer from Mississippi State on the hardwood. But this recruitment's wide open, and like we talked about with KJ Bolden, he could shine in the secondary or at wide receiver on the next level.
It's pretty early for these class of 2024 prospects, but we appreciate you shining a little bit of a light on the early recruiting process for them. Steve, thank you so much for all your great insight. Be sure to check out new episodes of the Wiltfong Whip Around dropping every Monday and Friday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. He's also sticking around on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page to answer some of your viewer questions, so drop those in the chat. Blair, here at 24/7 Sports, we're always keeping our eye on the next recruiting class in 2024, but when do these recruiters turn their attention from 23 to 24?
You know, some have already started, and this is a process that begins really early for the 2024s. September 1st is when they're officially allowed to have that communication through electronic means and start that correspondence with recruits. But when you keep in mind how fast and accelerated the recruiting cycle is now, with players coming off the board in the spring and in the summer and the official visits that will happen early next year, you think about what, 5-6 months down the road, and a lot of these players are going to start coming off the board. So although it's a little bit early and we think about, oh, they're going to sign in a year, it's really a process that now is really fast, really accelerated. And I think, you know, these are the prospects that I think everyone turns their attention to as soon as pen meets paper in the 23 class.
Certainly a very exciting time for us here at 24/7 Sports, but we are turning our attention to this day, signing day 2022. It'll be a whole lot easier to turn our attention once that 23 class is officially locked in. Now, most of that will happen on December 21st. It is signing day. We'll bring you wall-to-wall coverage with our expert analysis right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. Well, our friend Steve Wiltfong calls this time of year spatula season because of all those commitment flips. So for those of you who are getting ready to prepare a Thanksgiving meal next week, you probably won't be able to look at this thing the same way again. I know I don't. But how about the food? What does that have to do with recruiting? Well, we may have cooked something up.
Joining us now are 24/7 Sports recruiting analysts Greg Biggins and Brian Dohn, also known as the culinary experts on the 24/7 Sports rankings team. We're a week out from Thanksgiving dinner, guys, so let's compare some 2023 recruiting classes with some Thanksgiving dishes. Brian, let's begin with you. Turkey is usually the star of the show. It's known as perhaps the main course or that main meal that everyone wants to get to. So let's talk about the recruiting class right now that closely resembles that. Who is the star of the 2023 recruiting cycle?
Well, a couple things, Blair. First of all, turducken is the star of Thanksgiving. And for me, that's like Alabama, Georgia right now. And right now, my turkey is still in the fridge. Haven't even started thawing it out. So there's a lot of time to play between now and even next week. But for me, the class that I don't think enough people are talking about, it's Florida. They're 8th in the country. They're 4th in the SEC, 2nd in the SEC East. And I get you have to compete with the Tennessees, Bamas, Georgias. And it just takes time. And they've, Biggins out there with you, they flipped the quarterback, Jaden Rashada. He's one of 5 flips in this class for them. They have a couple other guys on their radar in terms of trying to flip. Lucas Simmons, who's at Florida State. Mark Fletcher, the running back with Ohio State, John Walker, the defensive lineman at UCF. they've already flipped, like I said, 5 guys. They've put together a really good class just in terms of depth. They've got defensive linemen, 4 receivers. You look, like I said, D-line, you have 6 of them. You have 5 DBs. It's just, they're really putting the pieces together there. And I think sometimes it's easy to overlook it because they're not having the best season on the field in terms of win-loss record. But I'm really happy with where they're at as a class when you look at it in its totality and with being able to compete with Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah, Florida, Bama, Georgia, all those schools right now look like the star of the table as we approach the early signing period. From turkey to maybe a dish that is a bit underrated. People love it. People like it. It seems to be a dish that, has a lot of fans. That would be stuffing, Greg. Who is maybe the most underrated or underlooked class right now in this 2023 recruiting cycle?
Yeah, so Blair, not a big stuffing guy, but I do like the Washington Huskies. Probably not a top 25 class, so it might be overlooked, but a top 30 class for me. And I like some guys, and there's some players in that class that are kind of trending up right now. Quarterback Lincoln Kindholt is a player that we've talked about a lot. Probably going to end up being a 4-star. Elijah Jacket in that 3-4-star bubble. Vincent Holmes, I like a lot. Rasheed Williams, Landon Hatchett in state. And the reason why I like the class so much for Washington, it's a balanced class. You got your quarterback, you got your running back, O-line, D-line. I'm not ever a huge fan of a class that just overloads one position, right? You'll see some class with 8 receivers and maybe 1 O-lineman. So I think Washington's done a nice job. Call it need and balance, yet still has some star power at the top of the board. So really good job by the Huskies. Kalen DeBoer, his first year there, doing an amazing job on the field. And obviously, I think recruiting-wise, again, in top 30 class and trending up for me.
Yeah, and we'll see what dividends that win against Oregon earlier this month has on the recruiting trail as they try to put the finishing touches here on this 2023 recruiting class. Brian, let's move on to mashed potatoes. Some people think they're okay. Some people love them. It depends on maybe what you put on top of them. They're good, but maybe not great overall. Who's the class right now that closely, signifies kind of what mashed potatoes are as a dish?
Man, the state of Idaho is not going to be happy with you right now when you're just dissing the potatoes like that. But for me, it's North Carolina. You're talking about a team that's 9-1, 6-0 in the ACC, on its way to the ACC championship game. They're ranked 21 in the country, 5th in the ACC, and that's good, right? And so you figure as Mac Brown took a lot of heat in the last few seasons as far as not being able to win games. And this year they're 9-1. People are still complaining about the defense. And the class is kind of the same way. I think it's a solid class, but the comparison is to what they did, especially near campus in the last 2 classes, where this year they have one of the top 9 players committed from in the state. And that's not what they did in the past, right? So in the past, it was 4 of the top 7 last year. And then you look at Virginia, and they have 2 of the top 10 players in the state of Virginia in this class. And in the last class, it was 5 of the top 8. And they were getting some really high-end guys. They're getting some really good players, whether it's, J. Braun Harvey, who's an edge that we all absolutely love, Christian Hamilton, Tyler Thompson, Paul Billups out of Virginia is a really good receiver, Christian Hamilton. But can they hold on to Kavion Keys, the 4-star linebacker out of Virginia, who, Penn State's really trying to flip. So is Texas A&M. Florida's trying to get involved with them too. But it's good. It may be that class that kind of sticks everything together, kind of, like a starch dish could do. But to me, it is North Carolina. It's just because of what they set in previous classes as far as the bar.
I don't know if you ever put stuffing in mashed potatoes, but it's usually a hit. Let's move on to
blasphemous, Blair. That's blasphemous.
Let's move on to the final dish, and that would be dessert. Greg, pumpkin pie. People either love it or hate it. First of all, where do you stand? And second of all, which class signifies what pumpkin pie is?
Yeah, so I have a strong dislike for pumpkin pie. It smells like pumpkin to me. And I just can't imagine eating pumpkin. It doesn't do it for me. The rest of my family loves it, though. So it's very polarizing. So I went with Texas, but I don't know if it even fits this category. But is there a more polarizing team than Texas? It seems like people either, love them or hate them. And is there a more polarizing player than Arch Manning, right? A week doesn't go by when you hear people saying how he's overrated. He's only number one because of his last name. And most of these people have never actually watched 2 seconds of him or don't really know much about quarterback play. So to kind of put it in perspective for me, not a pumpkin guy, but I do like Texas's class quite a bit. Not just Arch, but Jonte Cook had a huge weekend this past week with DeAndre Moore and Jacoby Lane, a few other guys. It's going to be a top 5 class. It's going to be a great class. And I think people are going to be excited about it, but people will still probably try to find little reasons to kind of pick at it a little bit. And I think people will still find a reason to want to say, should Arch really be the number one guy? Has he earned that spot? And so, again, polarizing, pumpkin pie, polarizing Texas, Arch Manning, it's kind of fit for me, Blair. So I went with it.
Yeah, don't sleep on pumpkin pie, especially with a little whipped cream on top. That's Greg Biggins and Brian Dohn. Thank you so much for breaking down the 2023 recruiting classes as Thanksgiving dinner dishes. You can catch all their work over at 247sports.com.
Absolutely epic. All right, the people who called this weekend of the college football calendar Cupcake Week clearly aren't paying attention to what's happening in the Pac-12. 4 teams are fighting for a spot in the conference championship game, and they're all playing each other. But our focus is on the city of Angels. And speaking of, let's welcome in national recruiting analyst Brandon Huffman. Brandon, UCLA and USC square off at the Rose Bowl. This one has Pac-12 implications, championship implications, but what about recruiting? What does this game mean from that standpoint?
With UCLA finally having an opportunity to have a key game in a ideal time frame. In some of their earlier games, they were playing at 11 in the morning. They played their first Pac-12 home game on a Friday night when high school players were playing. Now they have a chance to have their biggest recruiting weekend of the year. 7 of their 10 commitments will be there. The other guys have playoff games. They've got some other 2024 targets coming in, some of their top guys on the board in the 2024 class. And then they got a couple of commits to other schools in the 2023 class that will be in Pasadena on Saturday, but a big opportunity for the Bruins against their crosstown rival who they beat a year ago. The last time UCLA had recruits at the Rose Bowl for a game against USC was in 2018. Their 2020 home game was played in front of no fans during the COVID year. So this is a big opportunity for UCLA to, overcome some of those early season crowds that weren't big, to have a sellout crowd in the Rose Bowl, have the biggest student section expected in school history, and to have these top recruits in the next few classes in the Rose Bowl. It's a big chance for Chip Kelly and his UCLA program.
Yeah, Huff, I think back to what USC and UCLA can be in the city, right? When they're battling out for recruits, that are watching at home from up and down the West Coast. And I think about the trajectory of both programs, right? USC in the top 10 right now in the college football playoff. They're still in the hunt there for one of those top 4 spots. Who needs this more from a recruiting standpoint? Is it Lincoln Riley? Is it Chip Kelly?
No, I think it's Chip Kelly, and partly because Lincoln Riley's going to have his opportunity to have another showcase game the following week at the Coliseum when they host Notre Dame. But this is UCLA's last chance in the Rose Bowl. Again, you go back to some of those early season crowds, there might be more people on this show right now than were at the Rose Bowl for some of those games. Now they're going to have a full crowd. Now they're going to see a program that in year 5 looks like they're finally have that corner turn that Chip Kelly had been building for. And if Chip Kelly can beat Lincoln Riley in year 1, he'll have a winning record against USC in his time there. He will show those recruits that this is a program that has turned that corner and they're on solid footing and stable footing. And it's a big chance for them to make an impression on maybe a couple of those guys that are committed elsewhere right now to think, hey, if I stay home, I can play in this kind of crowd, in this kind of environment. And it's a big chance for them, not just for the 2023 class, but really to get a head start on 2024 with a player like DeAndre Carter there. Damon Williams is one of the top quarterbacks on their board. A lot of golden opportunities are at stake for UCLA this weekend. Lincoln Riley will get his chance next week against Notre Dame, but this is big for Chip Kelly and UCLA on Saturday.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room. It's a Pac-12 showdown now, but a Big Ten showdown in just a few years. Brandon, these 2 teams are having great seasons. They're in a tremendous region for talent, but how has the move to play most of its games very, very far from home been received among recruits in California?
generally speaking, the players are interested in it. They're excited for it. We've seen a lot of West Coast players go to the Big Ten in recent years. C.J. Stroud, a Southern Californian, playing at Ohio State. We've seen guys from the state go to Michigan. We've seen them go kind of all over the Big Ten and never have a reason to feel like they needed to stay close to home and go national. Now they would have a chance to play the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Penn States on a yearly basis and stay in Los Angeles. Now, that being said, not everybody thinks it's a great idea. In fact, Brandon Baker, who's the #1 offensive tackle in the country in the 2024 class, out of Mater Dei in Southern California, right now I think Oregon's in a better spot for him despite being a Southland native. And he even said back in the summer when I did a reaction piece to UCLA and USC leaving, that they keep selling that they're the home school, but them going to the Big Ten doesn't make it feel like they're as much the home school as you would think. And I thought that was a very, first of all, a pretty smart answer for a 16-year-old to have, but also something that maybe UCLA and USC didn't think long-term. While the opportunity for more money, the opportunity for more exposure might be there by making the move to the Big Ten, not every Southern Californian is fired up by the opportunity to go play 5 games clear on the other side of the country in October and November each year.
Huff, you mentioned Damon Williams, the 4-star quarterback from the state of Arizona, one of the better prospects out west in the 2024 class, a clear top target for Chip Kelly. And he mentioned to me that he was waiting until this game to get out to the Rose Bowl because he had heard about the crowds. He had heard about the lack of attendance inside that stadium, and he wanted the true atmosphere. He wanted the true vibe of what it could be to play at UCLA in a big game. What right now is the perception of UCLA with recruits?
Well, I think there's a positive perception from a on-field standpoint, from a production standpoint, what Zach Charbonnet has been able to do this year, what Dorian Thompson-Robinson has been able to do. But a lot of the success that they've had has been guys in the transfer portal. So how does that resonate with recruits? Maybe some of these guys are thinking, if I go somewhere far, it doesn't work out, I can always bounce back to UCLA. But then there's others that say, hey, this is an offense that allows me to showcase my ability. Then you see the defense, which has had its moments this year of struggle. Some of these defensive prospects might think, I could be a guy that goes in there and helps shore up that. Now, we know that the crowds in the early part of the season definitely cast a non-favorable look on UCLA, but that's probably why UCLA didn't push to have as many recruits come until the end of the season, so that way they can have the crowd that you're going to have in the Rose Bowl on Saturday. Blair, you and I both grew up in Southern California. We've been to games at the Coliseum. We've been to games at the Rose Bowl. When that rivalry is played, when you have, two of the most iconic uniform collections, both wearing those home uniforms inside the Coliseum or inside the Rose Bowl, as will be on Saturday, that resonates with everybody from the Southland. And while Southern California might have a lot of people from outside the region, that's the rivalry that everybody in Southern California watches. And this is the rivalry that all these recruits watch. Their high school coaches picked a team early on. They were either UCLA guys or USC guys. Their families probably picked the school. So this is the kind of game that it's not just about one game who gets the victory bell, but this is the kind of program defining win for both schools that really helps with recruiting in future years. And Damon Williams, leading the state of Arizona this weekend to come out, gets to experience what people in Southern California get to experience every year.
Fan attendance or not, I would much rather play a game in LA in November than Ohio or Michigan. So that is definitely a draw for some of those recruits. Brandon, let's wrap it up with some other notable visits in the Pac-12 this weekend.
Yeah, Washington will have their final home game coming off that big win over Oregon on the road. They have their final home game on Saturday against Colorado at Husky Stadium. They've got a couple official visitors coming in, guys that are committed to them, Devin Bryant, Keith Reynolds. But a big name to keep an eye on, the top uncommitted prospect in Northern California, top 247 receiver Tayshawn Lyons out of Tennyson High School in Hayward. He took an official visit to Washington back in June, didn't commit, even though all signs are pointing there. He took a visit down to Miami, went to Notre Dame at the beginning of the season. He will be back in Seattle this weekend for an unofficial visit so he can take in the game. He's a guy who has seen his stock just soar this season with the big year on the field. He's got offers from all over the country. He named a top 8, and shortly after that, Texas A&M offered him. Miami has been pushing for him. Georgia and Tennessee are keeping a close eye on him. Notre Dame looked like they may be the front runner to get him, but his heart originally was with Washington, so the Huskies will have him on campus this weekend. You go down to Cal this weekend. Cal plays Stanford in the big game. They'll have some of their local targets there, some of their local commits, including Naki Tuakoi, who's one of the top fast-rising guys, not far from where Tayshaun Lyons is from, out of Oakland. And then Oregon. Oregon has a mammoth tilt of their own late Saturday night with Utah. Keep an eye on Fox Crater. He's a top 10 prospect in the state of Washington. He's been a key target of Oregon for quite some time, has an offer for the Ducks. He's been to 4 previous home games at the University of Oregon this season. He could be on commit watch. We've had our crystal ball on Oregon to get Crater, who grew up about 2.5 hours north of the University of Oregon campus, kind of equidistant between University of Washington and University of Oregon, but the Ducks are in a good spot to land Crater. He will be in Eugene this weekend for the final home game for Oregon, just a week after the Ducks had Caden Proctor, the #1 tackle in the country, there for a surprise official visit. And that was a few months after Oregon signed the #1 tackle in the country in the 2022 class in Josh Connerly. So Adrian Clem is certainly looking at tackles that play basketball, that have that athletic background. Fox Crater, a top 10 player in the state, will be in Eugene this weekend, one of a number of players coming in for unofficial visits, and Oregon is hoping to lock him up sooner rather than later.
Very exciting weekend in the Pac-12. Brandon, thank you for breaking it all down for us. You can read his work at 247sports.com and follow him on Twitter at Brandon Huffman. The UC Board of Regents actually met today and announced that they're pushing the official decision on whether or not UCLA will leave for the Big Ten until December 14th. So their move is technically not final. USC, though, they're gone for sure. Assuming that both of these schools do leave, what does the future of the Pac-12 look like without them?
Yeah, if we're speculating that both those schools are gone and every school that remains in the conference is still in the Pac-12, you would have to look at Oregon, you would have to look at Washington, you would even have to look at the schools in Arizona, ASU and Arizona State, as perhaps the flagship programs and maybe the destination schools now for a lot of prospects up and down the West Coast. It's tough for Stanford, it's tough for Cal because they recruit on a different level given their academic standards. So they can't go after basically every recruit that the other schools can go after. But I do think it allows those schools, you know, the Oregons, the Washingtons, the ASUs and the Arizonas to really make a push for a nationally ranked class now with USC, UCLA gone. They're going to be fighting for different types of recruits. Some prospects are now going to want to leave to go play in the Big Ten or go play against USC or UCLA. But I do think it gives the edge and the upper hand to the Northwest schools, Washington, Oregon, and they might be able to clean up if both LA schools end up in the Big Ten.
May with a shot up the seam and strike, just what they needed.
May going to throw to the end zone, touchdown.
Here he is again, stepping away from pressure. Oh my goodness, that was Mahomes-esque. Here's May, pressure coming, going to turn, throw toward Green. Touchdown, Carolina.
He navigates the middle of that field so well. Seen this so many times throughout the season.
Check this out by Drake May. I mean, it's a great move, and then he gets out in the open field.
Drake May. The Heisman Committee, take notice of this young man.
Yeah, so Drake May is playing all right this season. These stats in his amazing season may surprise some, but here at 247 Sports, we had him as a 5-star and the #4 quarterback in his class. So we knew that he would be pretty good, but probably not Heisman caliber in his first season as a starter. But maybe this guy saw it from a mile away, or even closer than that. Staff writer for Inside Carolina, Don Callahan, joins us. Don, I appreciate you here. You're there. Take us behind the scenes of how the Tar Heels were able to flip May from Alabama during his exciting recruitment.
Well, first and foremost, he was UNC legacy, or is a UNC legacy, and that was, in the background the whole time. But the actual flip, I think it was 3 items you can kind of point to. One was the relentless recruiting of Dre Bly, who Drake May has known since Dre was involved in the Charlotte football community before he became a coach in North Carolina. And Phil Longo, who really does a good job of establishing relationships with his quarterback recruits. And then number 2, it was Bryce Young. UNC, when Drake committed to Alabama didn't have a 2020 and a 2021 commitment at the quarterback position. And then suddenly Bryce Young was added late on in his cycle. And that wasn't something that Drake liked to see. And then third, it was UNC producing on the football field. Drake, looking back, will actually point to that Clemson game where UNC lost but took the Tigers down to the wire as a point where he felt like North Carolina could do what he was hoping his future school could do. You add in a couple of secret visits, and then you have a flip.
Love it.
Yeah,
all right.
Don, obviously Drake May was a huge recruiting win for them. With regards to this 2023 recruiting cycle, there's only 2 players in the top 10 from the state of North Carolina that are committed to the Tar Heels. Why have the Tar Heels been struggling in this 2023 recruiting cycle when they are targeting these in-state prospects?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was last season. UNC didn't do what they were projected to do. There was a lot of hype going into the season, so it made the fall that much harder. Plus, Mac Brown was selling during the prior cycles just what he could build at North Carolina, and UNC might have arrived a little bit sooner just because of what Sam Howell was doing on the football field. And then when he lost some weapons, it kind of fell apart last season, and that really hurt UNC in this cycle.
Well, one of the top players in the class is a 4-star linebacker, Kavion Keys. He's been committed since August, but the Sharks are swarming this time of year. I know a lot of people want his services. So where do things stand with him and the Tar Heels?
Well, he admitted when he committed to North Carolina that he intended on taking official visits to other schools. Thus far, none of those visits have been scheduled or have been taken. He did take that visit for the Whiteout game to Penn State. But in a lot of these situations, it's what has changed, with the main, challengers to North Carolina, with Penn State and Virginia Tech and Texas A&M, not a whole lot. And I think the distance, the proximity to home is big with North Carolina for Kavion Keys, and his family are big Tar Heel fans, believe it or not. And I think that's going to really help North Carolina in the long run with this situation.
Don, Joshua Horton is one player that's already committed to North Carolina that other schools are trying to flip. What's the latest on Horton and his recruiting process?
So he says all the right things right now, but he's the one I would long-term worry about the most. And that's mostly because of Auburn, I think, it could be potentially dangerous. And a lot of that depends on who they hire, if they make Horton a priority, and if he even likes the new head coach. But we talked about proximity with Kavion Keys. The same holds here with Horton. Auburn is under 2 hours away from his home. North Carolina is almost 6-hour drive for him. So I think that plays a factor. The big development in this recruitment, though, is he's scheduled to visit North Carolina this weekend. It's strange to say a commitment this late in the season being the biggest recruit on campus, but he's going to be the biggest recruit on campus this weekend just because it's his first visit to North Carolina since he committed to North Carolina, and it's going to be only his second visit overall. His first was an official visit back in June. But UNC is still going to have to kind of fight this one out depending on what Auburn does.
Certainly can't hurt that the Tar Heels are getting ready to play in an ACC championship game. Don, thank you so much for putting that all into perspective for us. Check out Inside Carolina for all things Tar Heels all season long. Blair, it is our favorite time in the show. We're going to answer some viewer questions. We're going to roll through a couple of them here real quick. Let's start with Jeremiah Bogan asking, do you think Bama finishes with the #1 class?
I do. I really like what Nick Saban has left on the table ahead of the early signing period. You can never count him out as the best closer, as a recruiter. You welcome recruits into that office and you just show them all the hardware, you show them all the jewelry. And I think that's what Nick Saban can do. And I don't know if anyone can catch them. Maybe Georgia, maybe, some of these schools that are trying to close with a flurry. But I think the gap is so wide that Alabama should be in a good spot to finish with the #1 overall recruiting class.
It feels like a pretty easy sell there down in Tuscaloosa. All right, this one comes from Mr. Swag. I really hope that's your true name. Who do you guys see flipping to Florida in the 2023 cycle? We talked a little bit about them last week. There's a lot of guys that Billy Napier has his eye on.
Yeah, Mark Fletcher is one of them. We broke him down earlier in the show. He's obviously a prospect that they have really high on their board. And then keep an eye on Lucas Simmons, currently committed to Florida State. So not only are they targeting prospects that are committed to their rival schools in state, but they're also kind of casting a wide net with Fletcher there, trying to delay flip him from Ohio State. So I do like both of those prospects to, potentially give the Gators a nice little finish here in 2023.
All right. Mike Crum asks, do you think that top 247 edge Samuel Mpemba is leaning to Georgia?
Yeah, I do. And you know what? The crystal balls have been on him since the spring. Nothing has really changed. He's been to a number of programs. But right now, when you think about defensive prospects like Mpemba and you think about Georgia, that seems like a marriage made in the most golden way, right? It's really the destination school right now for those elite and premier defensive prospects, and Samuel Mpemba certainly fit that bill for Georgia.
Certainly. Blair, thank you so much. I want to remind our viewers that we are off next week for Thanksgiving. Blair, I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving, and everybody out there enjoy the time with family. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. He's Blair Angulo. I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.